The fall of dictators has been a theme of history since antiquity. Often strongmen or revolutionaries, their promise of a golden dawn is typically short-lived or unfulfilled. Chaos is soon to follow. Be it Caesar in ancient Rome or Kabila in the Congo. So often military men with visions of greatness have reached the very pinnacle of power, only to see it swallow them whole. Assassination is a dramatic and dangerous event by any standards, and many have been historic. Join us today as we examine some of the most exceptional in history and their engrossing surrounding stories. Julius Caesar, 44 BC. One of the most famous figures in all of ancient Rome and history itself. Later, leaders named Kaiser and Tsar could credit their titles to the original himself, Caesar. Seen as one of the greatest military leaders in all of history, Julius Caesar would climb from leader of the Roman forces to Rome's dictator in 49 BCE. Caesar is regarded as the archetypal strongman. His leadership was based around a cult of personality, profound militarism, and a favoring of violence and force for maintaining social order. Later, strongmen including Napoleon Bonaparte and Benito Mussolini would describe themselves as Caesarists. For many political commentators, Caesarism is by no means a compliment. Yet despite a place in history, literary works, a Shakespeare play, and a listless legacy to his name, Caesar would meet quite the brutal end. The dictator of Rome couldn't get quite enough power, even by the rampaging Roman standards. His desire to be labeled king kind of rubbed the Roman populace the wrong way. The term king was synonymous with a suffering and subjugated public. At the Roman tribune, the equivalent of parliament voted against such a move, but Caesar was soon declared dictator for life. Come 45 BC, senators across Rome were planning the dictator's death. Famously attacked by close allies Brutus and Cassius among a score of others, Caesar was stabbed to death, some 23 to over 30 times. One of the most infamous assassinations in recorded history, and the man, declared dictator for life, was dictator no more. Benito Mussolini, 1945. Known by many of his followers as Il Duce, Benito Mussolini would rise to the very top of the Italian establishment as the leader of the National Fascist Party. In 1922, a mass demonstration from the PNF, led by Mussolini, would turn coup d'etat, and for the next 20 years, Benito Mussolini would be Italy's prime minister. Italy was a hotbed for the rising fascism across the continent of Europe in the early 20th century, with the notorious black shirts. The paramilitary wing of Mussolini's Nationalist Party was dressed in all-black uniforms and would become a symbol of fascist rule. This all-volunteer outfit would serve as the template for Hitler's essay in Germany. Once appointed by King Victor Emmanuel III, Mussolini would soon pass laws making his rule a one-party dictatorship by the end of the 1920s. During his rule, Mussolini would flex Italy's fascist verve across the globe. Across the 1920s, Mussolini's Italy would make efforts to colonize Libya. He would bomb Corfu, turn Albania into a de facto Italian state, and take the city of Fiume under Italian rule. In the 1930s, Mussolini would back Franco in the Spanish Civil War and would conquer Ethiopia, merging them with Somalia and Eritrea. Yet ironically, come World War II, Italy was bereft of resources and left it close to powerless for the changing tides ahead. Following his kidnap at the Gran Sasso raid in 1943, northern Italy was made a puppet state for the Nazi fight against the Allies, and Mussolini's power was extinguished as the war drew to its close. On April 25, 1945, following capture by communist partisans, Mussolini was shot along with fellow fascists at Giuliano di Mazzagra. 4 days later, their bodies were hung upside down from a gas station roof in Milan. Fascism's time was over in Italy. Anwar Sadat, 1981. Muhammad Anwar el-Sadat would start his life as one of 13 siblings of a poor family and go on to change the entire shape of Egypt and its history. Born on Christmas Day, 1918, Sadat graduated from the Royal Military Academy at 20 years old before entering the army as a second lieutenant. His appetite for harboring change and standing up to the status quo was already visible as a young army officer. Meeting Gamal Abdel Nasser, who would go on to be the second president of Egypt, they launched the Free Officers, a group dedicated to removing the British occupation from Egypt. His connection and union with Nasser would be fundamental to Sadat's story. Their Free Officers organization would play a key role in the Egyptian Revolution in 1952. Sadat himself would announce to the public over the radio that King Farouk had been overthrown. Just 2 years later, under Nasser's presidency, Sadat would be made Minister of State in 1954. Yet it would be over a decade of government position climbing to vice president before Sadat's own presidency would begin. On September 28, 1970, President Nasser suffered a heart attack, and Sadat assumed the role within days. He was a figure held in suspicion as a waterholder and puppet of previous policies, but soon proved his doubters wrong. In a remarkable double helix and display of the complexities of state leadership, Sadat's reign would be one of profound departure from anything that came before. He would reinstate the multi-party system, begin a departure from USSR dependence, and lean towards aid and allegiance with the United States. Yet war and peace would be the defining themes of Sadat's presidency. He would be a hero to the Arab world when Egyptian forces regained the Sinai Peninsula from the Yom Kippur War of 1973. Astonishingly, across the next 5 years, he would engage with abandon peace negotiations with Israel. This would conclude with the Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty in 1979, following the Camp David Accords in the year previous. Along with Menachem Begin, President Sadat would win the Nobel Peace Prize, the first Muslim Nobel laureate. Yet this profound step in the direction of peace would earn Sadat enemies. Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood and left would reject the treaty, and Egypt's signing of a peace treaty alone without consultation of further Arab states caused immense tension. Just 2 years later in 1981, militants armed with automatic rifles would assassinate Sadat during a Yom Kippur parade in Cairo. Nicolae Ceausescu, 1989. The head of state and dictator of Romania from 1967 to 1989, Nicolae Ceausescu represents the most repressive and dictatorial chapter of the Eastern Bloc's story. Starting as General Secretary of the Communist Party in 1965, Ceausescu would take a firm grip on power that would change Romania indelibly. His rule opened with something of a false hope. His opening year as head of state included a famed speech condemning the 1968 invasion of Czechoslovakia and an easing of press censorship. Yet this was just the opening 12 months. The worst was very much to come. Soon, a secret police was active, the press was heavily censored, and human rights abuses were widespread across the country. Ceausescu's rule would begin a grand decline across the 70s and 80s. Ill-fated oil ventures sent the country into extravagant debt, and Decree 770 restricted birth control and contraception, leading to an inundation of Romanian orphans and unsafe abortions. In an attempt to address the debt, Ceausescu would export the majority of the country's agricultural production at the cost of living standards and austerity. The debt would be wiped clean by 1989, but the horrors of the Romanian population would remain. Ceausescu would remain on his ever-growing cult of personality, but that would only carry him so far. After a failed coup attempt in 1984, Ceausescu would meet his end on Christmas Day, 1989. At 71 years old, the dictator won re-election for a further 5 years, but his government would decay in a matter of months. Violent uprisings across Bucharest and Timisoara showcased the end of communism in Eastern Europe, as the Romanian Revolution was on the way. Ceausescu would attempt to control the baying crowds on December 21, 1989 at Revolution Square. Famously, as he spoke, the dictator was jeered and booed. His facial expression caught on film for the world to see, and Ceausescu's days were numbered. Attempting flight, Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu were captured by army soldiers on December 25th. They were given a brief trial before being executed by firing squad, a moment filmed and broadcast on Romanian television, no less. Laurent Désiré Kabila, 2001. A revolutionary who would go on to lead the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Laurent Désiré Kabila would be at the heart of the region's wars for decades. At just 21, Kabila would organize the Baluba to oppose the secession of Katanga after Congo's 1960 independence. He would also be sent to Kivu and North Katanga provinces to organize revolution in the mid-1960s. Kabila made a name for himself in the Simba rebellions and would take his activities cross-border in Kigoma, Tanzania. Curiously, for all the revolutionary assignments granted to Kabila, he would not pass the test in some significant eyes. Che Guevara arrived in Congo in April 1965 with around 100 men with him to assist in a Cuba-esque overthrow of the Congolese government. Working alongside Kabila for several months, Guevara is said to have been far from impressed with Kabila. Though recognizing his qualities as a leader, Kabila was regarded as far from a serious revolutionary in the eyes of Che Guevara. The Argentine revolutionary was unimpressed by Kabila showing up late, spending his time in bars and brothels instead of training his men. An attempted revolution was dropped, and Kabila would return to Timber and Old on the border of Tanzania. That's not to say Kabila's appetite for revolution was muted. From 1967 to 1988, Kabila and his supporters would start the People's Revolutionary Party in South Kivu, Congo. This was a functioning successionist Marxist state, where Kabila would establish contacts including Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni. Both would be future presidents of Rwanda and Uganda, and both would be architects of the First Congo War. In 1997, Kabila led his alliance of Democratic Forces of the Liberation of Congo to overthrow his nemesis, Mobutu. Kabila had finally achieved his dream of revolution and declared himself president. Zaire was renamed the Democratic Republic of the Congo once again, but there would be a price. Rwanda and Uganda had sponsored his ADFLC rebels. Kabila was merely a puppet. For all his revolutionary zeal throughout his life, his presidency was viewed as a carbon copy of the corrupt authoritarianism he'd spent a life opposing. Just a year into his presidency, his Rwandan and Ugandan allies would turn on him, fostering the Second Congo War. The conflict would last from 1998 until 2003. The assassination of Kabila would punctuate it. In 2001, he was shot dead in his office, assassinated by one of his own bodyguards. This is History on Fleek, and we'll see you next time.